I'm a believer that most of the time your education is primarily dictated by your environment in your home. And that is 100%, like I will credit my parents. That was from the get go hammered into me as far as saying, take academics seriously. So, when I went to school, I knew that this was important and this had a payoff in the end.
Hello, friends. This is Susan Shull, your host for the Clean Heart Club podcast. I'm a farm wife, mom, Grammie, holy yoga teacher, and Christian life coach. Clean Heart Club is the place for you if you want to learn to live in abundance and walk in freedom to be 100% your true self. I can't wait to share with you guided meditations and sacred story interviews with some of my favorite people. Wherever you are on your path, I'm excited to join hands as we allow our loving Heavenly Father to clean up our hearts and we start living the adventure of our lives with joy and gratitude. This is going to be fun. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Clean Heart Club podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you today to our nephew, Levi McDaniel, who
Hello.
is an internist. And we're just so proud of him and all that he's accomplishing in the world as a doctor, but also as a father and a husband, more importantly, as a community member, and just as a faith-filled person operating in 2025. So I think you will love learning from him. I'm so excited. And Levi, thank you so much for this opportunity. So would you
Thank
start
you for
out
having me
just
on.
by telling us a little bit about your background, how you got started in medicine, just anything that you think people should know about Levi McDaniel?
Well, I come from very good stock, primarily from my mother's side, Shoal side. Yeah, so your husband is my Uncle Brad, my wife's brother. And so, I my father's Mark, and so that's how I got my last name with Mark McDaniel, and Levi McDaniel will be my name. But so just about me, I grew up in Albion, Illinois, just south of Hidalgo and Newton, from where you are. Very similar area, though. It's a small town. It's a very rural community. A lot of farming is the main economic driver, and I grew up. Where I grew up, the home I grew up in was actually built by my great grandfather, and so there was just a lot of family heritage from where I was. I never did any farming like you guys did growing up. Um, Primarily, my dad worked for a local factory, but we were always just kind of around that type of environment, and so and I had gotten interested in healthcare. I don't know if I would say like I had an exact timeline of when I would say like this was a defining time of saying, yes, I wanted to go into this career, but it had been an interest of mine for a while. I was always encouraged by my parents to pursue it, to say like, listen, if you have a desire to do that, we're behind you. Go for it completely. And so that was kind of my upbringing. My siblings and I had a really a tremendous childhood. I look back on it with just lots of nostalgia and really good times. And so I was really thankful for the life that they gave me. And so then that was going into healthcare, which is kind of always the trajectory of what I wanted to do. If it was just, if I could get the grades, if I could hit all the steps and the milestones that I needed to. So that's kind of at least my short background about what kind of put me into that area. I can't say like again, it's hard to say if there was a really defining moment to say, oh, that was what drove me to go into healthcare. That's what made me want to be a doctor. It's hard to say, but that's at least kind of my basic background. I don't know if you want to go into the other like the steps after that or not, but just a little
Well,
bit there.
before you do that, I guess I will just pop in here and say that Levi's mom, Nancy, and I were childhood friends,
Hmm.
and her brother Brad was always in the background. So Nancy and I were thrilled when the love bug bit, and we got to actually be family members, not just friends. So
So I will
I want to
reference
throw
you
that
and
in there.
Brad frequently to I don't know if my kids are a little bit too young for me to like really tell them, hey, that family friend, maybe a spouse. But whenever I'm talking with our mutual friends that have kids, I will tell them like, listen, I don't think there was much of a spark at the early stages of life. I think it was later on in high school when that started. So who knows? And wouldn't that
Yes.
be great
Who
if our
knows?
families got more long-term connected? So,
Yes, and actually, I spent the night with your mom a couple of times. Not, we didn't have a lot of sleepovers, but we did a lot of
uh,
things together. And I remember one morning that Brad came down the stairs and he looked at me and he said, "You have the biggest mouth of anybody I've ever known." Be- So it definitely was not a spark that started real young, but we did go out
he's
on our
never said
first
that
date
to you
when I
again,
was
right?
15. Pardon me?
He's never said that to you again, right?
He has never said that. And he
Hmm.
didn't mean it when he said, because I'm a very quiet person. But anyway, yes, the love bug can bite strong and it comes in unexpected places. So for sure. Okay, so one of the things I love about your story is that you grew up in this small town. You went to a small high school, and
Hmm.
you were probably like my kids when they went away to the U of I, and you went to the U of I too, and you were in classes with all these kids that came from much bigger high schools who had much more academic opportunity maybe than than you did at your small school, but you still got an education that enabled you to do what you wanted to with your life. And I think that's
Right.
really says a lot about your school system and about you personally.
I think I'm a believer that most of the time your education is primarily dictated by your environment and your home. And that is 100%, like I will credit my parents. That was from the get go hammered into me as far as saying, take academics seriously. So, when I went to school, I knew that this was important and this had a payoff in the end. And so, I went to in Albion, we went to Edwards County, and I when I went to college, there were some times where I would say, I didn't know what an AP course was because we just didn't have them. We had a different system, like we had dual credit and some weighted courses, but I was in no way, shape, or form behind what other people were doing. I was able to go right in, and that was at again a small town. We had 300 people maximum in our high school when I was there. So it's primarily I think what your family environment is and the amount of work that you put into it, because most school systems are going to have the resources that you need as long as you are willing to do the work.
Yeah, that's so good. And that's encouraging because I think there are some people that think that in order for your kids to get a quality education, you have to go, to a city or a big town, but you honestly do not.
I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's that the people that value their education tend to group together. And so, therefore, a lot of times you see these clusters. I'm like, well, there's a lot of high performing. Well, it's because that's where all the people who wanted to be there ended up going. It had nothing to do with the school itself. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Okay, so you went to the U of I, then you went to medical school in Louisville.
uh-huh. Yeah,
How
yeah.
did you just how did you land on being an internist?
Um, that's a good question because I think it gets kind of confusing. Most people understand you go to medical school and then they're not really sure what happens after that. Um, your first 2 years of medical school, everybody does the same. It's primarily classwork. There's been some mild changes over the last 15 years since I was starting, but and that does seem like it makes it seem like I've been in medicine a long time when I say 15 years
It was
ago. I'm
yesterday.
still I'm still considered one of the real young guys in healthcare. Um, but so in your first 2 years, you're just doing classwork. Your third year is when you start doing your clinicals and you get exposed to the different fields. And it's the big fields. So like general surgery, family practice, OBGYN, pediatrics, internal medicine. And you're supposed to kind of then make a decision about what pathway you want to go. And then your fourth year, you then explore that subsection a little bit more. after that, you then go into your actual training. So um, I decided on internal medicine because I had for several years, I had wanted to go into oncology, which is just hematology oncology, which is treatment of cancers or blood disorders. And the pathway to do that, you needed to do internal medicine. And an easy way of describing internal medicine is basically primary care for adults. And so it's really broad, and that can put you into lots of different specialties and categories and pathways. And so I had wanted to do that pathway initially, and so internal medicine was the natural thing to choose there. And because it was really broad, it was to say you could do a lot of outpatient care, or you could do a lot of inpatient care in the hospital. And so you had to be really widely versed. You did not get down into like only treating one small subsection of the body, and you weren't really allowed to just say, "Oh, that's not my job." Like I'm going to let somebody else worry about that. You had to kind of have a good broad understanding of lots of things, and I much preferred that. Um, it did not internal medicine. Basically, you don't do any pediatrics, and I absolutely adore children, and I have four of my own. But I very quickly realized that uh, being a kids only doctor was not for me. So I don't need to get into the specifics of it, but I just preferred to do the medicine for the adult side. So the broadness of it, and that really, I think a lot of times when you think of your classic physician, it's somebody that's an internist or somebody that's a family medicine doctor that will see both adults and kids. And so I like that idea. I kind of like the idea of the classic um, picture of the physician, and that's who I wanted to be.
So, just for people who might not know, Nancy, Levi's mother, passed away very young of leukemia. And I'm guessing that that's probably one of the reasons you were interested in oncology and
Yeah, and that
blood.
was I was interested in that, and then that did not work out for various reasons. And in the end, though, I think what I was looking for something with what that field brought that did not have to be in treating cancers. It was something else about medicine generally that I really liked that I still get to do all the time now. So it's like what the reason that I was looking at that was not necessarily really enjoying the cancer aspect, but it was the relationship with the patients that was what really I wanted, and that's what I was
Oh,
pursuing,
wow.
and that's what I realized.
Wow. And everybody's dream doctor is someone that enjoys the relationship with the patient because we all want to be seen as more than just a body part when we go
Right,
to the doctor. At least that's how I feel about it.
right.
What's been the most surprising thing to you as someone who's relatively new in the healthcare field?
When I was in medical school, I think when they would talk to us about if you go into primary care, a big majority, or there's going to be a lot of your day is spent on doing mental health care for patients. And I thought, okay, I drastically underestimated what percentage that was going to be because that is a lot of my time on a daily basis is trying to address mental health issues. Now, I don't mean just, oh, this person has anxiety or depression, but it is that they have a lot of physical ailments that are basically stemming from the way that they're thinking or the way that they process things. And so, like, that is a huge percentage of the time in my day. And I was not necessarily expecting that because I think that's where most of, I don't want to say most of my day, but that's a large percentage of my day is spent trying to address that type of issue.
Yeah.
So,
Well, what you're saying is, I won't say it's music to my ears, but it's confirmation of what I've been learning in the past 5 years, getting working with a life coach myself and then becoming a life coach and learning how much unprocessed emotions affects our physical health.
right. Well, and there's definitely that aspect of it because here's a different example. I don't think quite along the guidelines of what you're saying, but like I'll have right now it's cold and flu season, and the vast majority of these illnesses are viral illnesses that, I don't have a magic pill. That's what everybody wants. They want me to have save them from the common cold. And so they'll come in and they'll basically say, I've had symptoms for 3 days. I've been taking this medicine and nothing's really working. I'm not feeling that much better. The solution really for me is just to kind of tell them, you're doing fine. Keep on doing what you're doing. I didn't really medically treat anything. I just kind of reassured them that you're going to be okay with this. But that was the appropriate thing to do, is to not really medically change anything, but just to give them reassurance. And that was me actually treating their mind rather than necessarily their lungs or their sinuses or anything else that was causing them the problem. So.
Yeah. So have you noticed an increase in mental health issues since COVID? I read that. Is that true in your experience?
I don't know if I would say I personally have. I think during the first 2 years, yes. For many different complicated reasons. I don't know if I would say that I see that right now as much as an increase.
Good.
What I would be worried about, though, is that the people who were teenagers really going through cognitive development at the beginning of this, like in 2020, people who are in early high school or even late junior high. I'm not sure what we did to them, and I'm not sure when we're going to see all the long-term effects from that. And I have some teacher friends who will frequently just say, this is an effect of COVID, based on its behaviors, its academic performance, and they'll just say, we're still dealing with COVID stuff. Basically, the kids are far behind, and a pediatrician friend of mine, she'll actually reference that sometimes, where she'll say, this is COVID. So I just may not have fully filtered up to me yet, because a lot of those people are in their 20s and they're not going to see the doctor very often at all. So.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Wow. Well,
But
COVID is its own beast.
Yes. We can talk about that, but I'm very thankful that does not take up a vast majority of my day anymore. I'm very glad to be past
I'm
that.
guessing you do. Oh my word. We were actually out of town. We had an appointment today out of town. And on the street was someone outside walking with a mask. And this is just a good reminder to me to stop making assumptions about people and to stop judging people. Because, I'm like, oh my gosh, why? But there's other reasons people could be wearing a mask. And I really don't want to talk about COVID. But let's switch gears and talk a little bit.
Ever heard me talk about COVID will be very thankful, because I can rant for a long, long time, and we don't need to do that today. It gets ugly.
And I would love to hear you rant about COVID and the craziness that, it definitely affected our family. So we know we see it from lots of different perspectives, just us. Yep. And I'm sure you see it from a totally different lens. But let's switch gears and talk a little bit about our heart. This is the Clean Heart Club, and I don't focus on health as much as I focus on the spiritual side of it. And, we have to have our hearts right. And God shows me often that there's still much work to do in my own heart. So, but let's talk about it from a physical standpoint. How can people take care of their hearts physically?
Okay. Let's talk about right now the biggest threat to a healthy heart. So I was asked on my interview at the University of Louisville to get into their medical school. I had a Dr. Campbell who did the interview. And at that time, that man was in his 80s, I think. He actually taught me for a few years when I was in medical school, but
Wow.
he was a, maybe he was late 70s, but I mean, he was a very much an older man when I did my interview with him. And he asked me the question, what do I perceive as the biggest health concern in the next few decades? And I said at that time, obesity. And I think that answer was the correct answer, but I also think that he appreciated that answer specifically because he reacted very positively to it. And I don't know if I don't think it was that answer that got me into school. But that was in 2008. We're 16 years later. And I think without a doubt, we would say that that is the biggest threat to a healthy heart right now. Um, Smoking has been essentially socially criticized so much and pushed to the side that it is a problem still, but it's just not the biggest threat anymore. It is our weight, and it is what we are doing through that to our hearts. So if we're going to talk just basically about what do you do to take care of your health, it is to maintain a healthy weight, first of all. I mean, there's just not, I don't have any doubt in my mind to say that that would be beneficial. And that can be for different reasons too. I mean, that it makes it easier on the heart to work as an efficient pump. The heavier that you are, the harder it has to work as a pump. But generally too, as you see your weight increase, the chances of you developing blockages in your arterial system also goes up. And so we can see what's happened over the last several decades with the obesity rates. Um, and I think that we could just easily say that that is the biggest issue. And so if we want to knock out the biggest issue for the vast majority of people, it would be let's get the weight down. Pretty pretty straightforward with that. So that would be like my easy, just top answer. I don't know if you want to go further into that, but I mean that's just
So,
quite easy to do. So
talking about weight, as somebody who has, I I've never been, I don't have it, never had an eating disorder, but I do think that I had disordered eating because I used food to solve a lot of problems, emotional needs. I would turn to food and I Pop Tarts and just unhealthy binging
yeah,
on things. And it, it,
I mean, listen,
so,
I am one that I struggle myself with my weight. I'm often in flux. And like you said, it's often our relationship with food is just disordered a little bit. And we have, I mean, we just have an abundance. We are blessed to not really have any issue with food accessibility. And if anything, we just have way too much available to us. And so, if you go into my pantry right now, it's stocked full of stuff that is just very easily accessible, and I can pop it in my mouth, and it can basically fulfill any craving that I have. And so, I I'm with you. I will use it as a crutch to say, oh, I'm feeling really good right now. Let's celebrate and eat something. I'm feeling bad like
or I'm
right
sad.
now. Let's eat something to make myself feel better. I'm bored. Let's eat something so I feel better. And so that it's and the thing is, it's so difficult about it is that it's I don't want to say that we have like a widespread addiction to food because I think that goes down an incorrect description of like what addiction is. But you have to eat in order to live. And so it's not like you have to smoke in order to live. Like that's something that you can completely cut out of your life and that you will do fine. But you can't do that with food. You have to
Yeah.
constantly make good choices regarding it. And it's tough. It is really tough as one who struggles with it. But it still doesn't mean that it's not the number one problem for sure.
Right. Right. And I don't know if about you, but managing my mind around food has been really important. I don't know if you're familiar with the 40-day sugar fast, but it's a Bible study and you go 40 days without sugar. And I've done that
I'm pretty sure my
multiple
wife,
times.
I think that book is on her desk at the moment.
It's so
She's done it.
good. The devotionals are so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I think she did it
But
last year, actually.
yeah, what I found was I would do the 40 days without sugar. I did Whole30 once, and I'm not going to get that crazy again because all I could think about was what I could eat. And I don't want to think about food that much.
Right.
But doing the 40-day sugar fast, I would do it. And the minute I let myself start having sugar again, blah, it just started all over again. So
Does that include
I'm
cutting out
talking
like,
too much.
does that cut out carbohydrates like completely too? So no breads,
It's
no pastas?
white, yeah, like white flour.
Yeah.
But for me, I don't think bread's my issue. It's sugar. So I just cut out sweets and added
Sure.
sugar. And I felt like the first time I did it, the first year, I felt like God was saying to me, Susan, would you give up sugar forever? And my answer was no. So I did the sugar fast, and not last year, but the year before, I felt like God, I don't know how you feel about this, but I felt in my spirit that God was inviting me to give up sugar for a year. And I did it. I didn't have any added sugar for a year. But as soon as I had sugar again, I think I'm kind of addicted to it, actually. I think I'm just better not to have any.
Well, I mean, biologically, we are not meant to have a lot of sugar. If you just look at like what a natural diet would look like, as far as like if we were just foraging around for food or eating animal-based products. And so when we would have sugar, it would signal to our bodies, hey, this is a very energy-rich food. You need to get as much of it as possible because this will allow you to store energy for a long time.
This podcast is brought to you by my new program, Clean Heart Club Live. Are you looking for ways to feel lighter, filled with purpose, and deeply connected to your Heavenly Father? Or are you looking for ways to handle stressful situations with more calm and ease? If you want more coaching support in a group environment and want to start off 2025 with a renewed sense of, falling in love with your purpose and God's plan for your life, I'd love for you to join me. All the details are in the show notes.
Whether or not like we would say like we're addicted to sugar and like truly following like an addictive pathway within our minds, I think there probably are people who truly are. But every individual usually will have a very positive response anytime they eat sugar because our body is thinking, I need to have as much energy as possible, so let me get as much as we can. Well, 150 years ago, you would maybe have a small piece of chocolate and that's all that you could get. Well, now I can go to Dollar General and get bags and bags and bags of it for a fraction of the price that it used to be. And so, it's we are wired to want as much of it as possible, and we have as much as we want, right, available to us. So it's a problem. I mean, it really is.
And what role does dopamine play in this?
I would probably very much speak incorrectly about a particular neuropathway. But generally, anytime that you get like that dopamine hit or that dopamine type sensation, you can get it a lot from eating. You can get it in lots of different exposures. But generally, when you get dopamine hits, you like that pleasure reward. And so you're more likely to then pursue it again. And like saying, let's keep going, let's hit it again. And if you have a bag of chocolate. Now, some people, like my wife, somehow they'll say that they have a sugar problem, and she can have a little 5-pack of M&Ms, like 5 M&Ms total, and make that last for 30 minutes. I don't get it. Some people are special. She's one of them.
I'm married to one too.
Last 2
oh
seconds.
My word!
Pop them in. So.
Oh, okay. So I feel like we need to touch on the topic of Ozempic. How do you feel about all that stuff?
Generally, I am not a believer that someone will ever become healthy because of an intervention that we make in the pharmaceutical world or from a medication based. When I talk to my patients, I will say, I am not good at making you healthy. I am decent at making you less sick. And so if somebody comes in for just high blood pressure, the ideal world would be for them to make lifestyle changes, weight loss, cutting down on their sugar intake, cardiovascular exercise. In the ideal world, they would do that and lower the blood pressure on their own. Many people are not able to do that based off of life circumstances or just willpower, not willing to do those changes. And so that is a point where I can come in, intervene, and make you less sick. I may get your blood pressure down to the exact same as somebody who does not have hypertension, but it would be a much better lifestyle, or it would be a much better prognosis for them to have the same exact blood pressure, but not on medicine. And so whenever I deal with obesity, I will tell people the exact same thing. It seems to me that you would be much better off by losing weight, by cutting down on calories, by increasing your exercise without the pharmaceutical intervention. I'm generally skeptical and worried that at some point we are going to have unintended consequences, potentially directly from the medicine, and as far as like a negative side effect that we're just not aware of. My father took medicine in the 90s, Fen, that everybody, it was an oral medicine, and it was very useful to help lose weight. Well, all of a sudden, then we started seeing that it was causing valvular issues in a lot of patients, and they took it off the market. We have tons of evidence historically that we have medications that are on the market, and then there are negative side effects that we were not aware of that become very prevalent and sufficient enough to pull it off the market. I don't have the evidence that that's going on with Ozempic. I don't have that evidence, or with any of the weight loss medicines out there. But anytime that we all of a sudden have millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people going onto these medications, I get worried that we're going to see a huge increase in side effects from the medicine. We know that there are a lot of side effects currently. I'll have full disclosure here. We had samples of Victoza and Ozempic in the past in our office, and I tried them to see what were the side effects of these drugs. Like it would be, you'd have nausea essentially all the time, just like low grade nausea, and it would be that like I don't want to eat. And so that's why you lose weight oftentimes, that you just don't want to eat, or when you do eat, you're just full much sooner than you normally would be. And I would have some chest discomfort, and it was just always there. And then as soon as I stopped it, I feel fine. So it's one of those to where I will always tell people, is this medicine effective? Yes. It's effective by making you eat less. It doesn't make you lose weight because your metabolism all of a sudden goes through the roof. It doesn't make you lose weight because now you want to go run a marathon. It just makes you eat less. That's the primary mechanism. And so if that's the primary mechanism, we should try to focus on you doing it on your own. Because all of what most of the evidence shows too is that as soon as you stop taking it, what happens to the weight? It comes right back on. And so if that's the case, if you lose the weight, but then it comes right back on as soon as you stop it, are we then going to tell people you're going to be on this the rest of your life? I hope not. Because again, then we run into it's very expensive, but then also, are the side effects going to be cumulative? If I have a patient who has a heart attack, I feel bad when I tell them you're going to have to be on like a baby aspirin and a statin for the rest of your life, because that's what we see as like lowers their risk for another one. I feel bad about telling them that, and that's just 2 pills in the morning, and they don't really have any side effects. But we have seemed with weight loss to potentially tell some people, not a big deal, you're going to have to take this shot for the rest of your life. That's going to come with a lot of potential side effects. And so I get it. It does help with people losing weight. When I talk to my patients, I am very hesitant to say this is the solution. And when I do prescribe it, I will usually say this is a short-term bridge, but you've got to change it up here. Like, we have got to develop the mindset change of like, okay, what are you eating? See how this is affecting you. Look at the positive outcomes that you were having. And it's just because you're eating less. That's why you are losing weight. it's because you're eating less. And if you can do that on the medicine, I think you could probably do it off the medicine too. So that's where we should focus on. But it's a really popular drug. They're making tons of money off of it, and we do have a lot of people who are losing weight. That is good. I mean, and I think that's where I do have to fall back a little bit. I'd be probably hypocritical to say the number one problem in the world right now with health for Americans is obesity, but how dare we use medicines to try to lower that risk? So, that there's that little dilemma there. But I still believe that it is yet to be seen what role these medicines are going to have for long-term obesity management, because I
Yeah.
do think that we run the risk of other things happening.
Yeah. I read something the other day that said that, and you tell me if this is true, because good grief, we read a lot of things, but it was said that it not only depletes your fat stores, but it also depletes your muscles. Is that true?
Yeah. So the exact percentage, I'm going to be off there. I'm not sure what that is. Let's say it's around 50%, because I think it was somewhere around 50%. So if you have a person that loses 20 pounds on the scale, the average I think was somewhere around 10 pounds of that was fat, and then 10 pounds of muscle or connective tissue. That does seem to be true, that it's a fairly large percentage. Then what typically will then be said is that, well, if you participate in cardiovascular or primarily resistance-based training, so like weightlifting or weight training, that you will avoid that loss, so that you can basically condition your muscles to say, hey, you're still needed and don't go away. Well, then why aren't we doing that in the first place? That's kind of my thing of like, okay, so you're telling me like that's the solution anyway, is to tell people we need to be doing more resistance-based training in the first place. And it's like, if people are not already doing that, they're not going to start doing it once we put them on the medicine.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a big percentage. It's not just fat tissue by any means.
I
You
can
will get
see,
that. You will get that with anybody who loses weight. Anybody who goes into a caloric deficit, they are likely to lose lean muscle tissue unless they are very proactive with their protein intake and their resistance training. But it does seem to be more in people who are using GLP-1s in general.
Interesting. I could see the value of combining any kind of weight loss with life coaching and learning to manage your mind. One of the thoughts that I practiced that year I was able to give up sugar was, I don't eat sugar. I said that to myself over and over. I don't eat sugar. And I didn't, because our minds are
Conditioned your
powerful.
mind, that's
And
like that. It was your
what we
identity
think.
that you were someone who did not eat sugar.
I don't eat sugar. But it turns out if I don't keep practicing that thought, I do want to eat a lot of sugar. So I get it. And the fact that we don't know what the long-term side effects are, that's really top of mind for me with a lot of this stuff, because that my sister Amy had cystic fibrosis and ended up dying, not of cystic fibrosis, but probably from the side effects of all the medicines that she had to be on after she had her double lung transplant. I mean, medicines have side effects. And I look back in my own life, and I was diagnosed with Graves' disease when Brandon was a junior in college. And we were super busy. And the doctor said, we're going to give you a radioactive iodine pill, and we're going to destroy your thyroid, and everything will be fine. And so I wasn't skeptical then. I just did whatever I was told. And I don't know if I might still have to do that, but I do wonder what the side effects are going to be eventually for not having.
Well, and we do have known side effects, some of them that I talked about. My main thing that I get concerned about is to say, like, okay, the most severe side effects, if it's only 1% of the population that would have that side effect, Well, it's not as big of a deal if only 10,000 people a year are on this. But if you have 20 million people that are taking these medications, if not more, because I think the projection is for this to be very commonplace, that 1% now as a total number is much higher. Um, and so that's just where it becomes the more people, if you prescribe it to everybody, just the more problems that you're going to see. And then is it actually beneficial? The more people that you're harming versus the people that you're helping, at what cost?
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
a cost analysis for everything that you do as far as saying, is this worth it? Like for what we're doing with who we're helping, but we're harming these people, is this really worth it?
Yeah. So it's a struggle. It's a struggle for sure. Okay. So keeping our weight down, exercise, we know what we need to do. It's just hard and we don't want to do it.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's especially when we're talking about, you can be disciplined for 23 hours and 50 minutes all day. You can do great. And
Or
then in
even
a
a
span of
year.
10 minutes, yeah. And you can fall off of it like that. So I think like when you're talking about how you say, I don't eat sugar, it's almost that you are trying to forge this new identity about yourself. And instead of it being I'm on a diet, it's that your diet changes to something that is just much more acceptable. Um, and again, that's a struggle that I have personally. I can't be just projecting that onto other people. That's for me as well to say, if you're just constantly in this mode of avoidance or of discipline, a lot of times that discipline wears out. And so you have to just build up that towards almost like, I don't even want that. It's hard to say I don't want sugar, but like it's just not part of who I am. Like that's something that I would not eat that
Right.
routinely. This is a purely thing that I would do during a celebratory time. So,
Yeah. And maybe plan it. That's worked for me too. Deciding ahead of
mm,
time, okay, I'm going to have dessert
right.
on the holiday, but I'm not going to have it every day. But I have so much empathy for people who struggle with it. So no judgment on my
Yeah.
part, but I do want to be healthy and take care of
Yeah.
our bodies because I feel like we have a valuable purpose in life and we need to be healthy to fulfill it. So I want to live. I have a friend who says, I want to live long and strong until I'm satisfied. That's a Bible verse from Jeremiah, I think.
Okay.
And yeah, I want to live long and strong until God calls me home. So that gets us into faith. So you and I are both believers.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious, how does your faith intersect with your profession? And how did it get to be 44 minutes into this already?
I can get windy as well, and or long-winded, I should say. um, that's why everyone should be thankful that I did not go on a COVID rant because we'd be at an hour and a half before we get into this. Okay. Um, I will say I'll try to focus more on when do I feel like it is at its most strong intersection. Um, on a daily basis, when I'm in my practice, there are not a lot of times to where I will have conversations about my faith with patients. It's usually based off of social things, and we're talking about, there's a lot of it's chronic issues. It's following up on, hey, we're managing these three or four things. All those things look to be going well. How's the family doing? What did you do for Christmas and New Year's? There will be times where it will come up if we are having discussions about mental health, where I will usually try to tell people, hey, if you're going to get in a better direction, I will usually say that a tripod of success. I come at it from, I do have pharmaceutical options that we can use if we feel like we really need them. Then there's the counseling leg, but then there's the spiritual leg. That's the third one that has to be there. And I'll ask, like, do you go to church anywhere? Are you involved with any type of spiritual leader? Do you have any faith whatsoever? Because that is going to be something that is more helpful probably than those other two legs combined, if you can pursue that. So that's probably where it comes up the most on the outpatient side. Um, Where I think though it probably intersects the most is when, and it'll be morbid probably sounding, but when I have the most rewarding time in my profession, and it's rewarding not in the sense of saying that was fun or that was great, but when I feel like I've done something most meaningful is really when I'm involved with a patient and their family in a time of big crisis. And so it's when their health is very poor, when they receive a terrible diagnosis. It's at the end of their life. Um, that is the time where I feel like I am fulfilling my purpose the most in being able to help them navigate it. Helping them navigate from the standpoint of, what are we going to do from a medical treatment, but also what are we going to do handling this from a personal and spiritual standpoint? How are we going to talk with the family about this? It's now approaching the end of your life. Are you wanting to continue this, or are you wanting to say this is my time to go? And where is your faith at? And most of the time, really, I will say, practicing where I do, and we didn't really talk about that at all, but like, I live in my hometown of Albion, and I practice primarily in Mount Carmel. So these are very similar areas to where you live. And most people do have a certain faith. It'll definitely be varying levels of intensity. But to be able to sit and pray with families during that time is an incredible blessing. And usually, if I think back on what were the big moments of the year that I remember, those are almost always the big ones that I remember. And I know, usually after those conversations, and usually after that time, I know that it was meaningful to them as well. And it's to the patient, but also to the family. And there's been just a few times to where, like, I will leave the hospital and I will know they will remember this for the rest of their lives. The people that were in that room will remember every single moment. I hope to, but I realize that I do this more frequently than they do. But knowing that I can be in a moment of their life that they will remember forever is what gives me the most satisfaction, and just feel like this is what I was supposed to be doing. Because I think there's times in people's health when it's going poorly, and they like that doctor that comes in and just tells them, "Here's what we're doing. These are the facts. And this is what we're going to do," and that's helpful. And sometimes, but oftentimes they do want somebody that is going to come in and really communicate to them on a holistic level of just like, who is this person? What is most important to them? And how do we help preserve that in this time that we're getting ready to go through? And it's whether somebody's just going to be really sick and get over it, or if somebody is really at the end of their life, and having those conversations are what I remember the most and just get the most, I guess, meaningful.
Can I ask you a personal question about your own faith?
Sure.
What's God doing in your heart right now?
Well, it's probably not related to my profession, really.
Which is fine.
Yeah. One of the things that when we moved back here, and I had started to notice for a while, was I felt that there were a lot of young men, particularly, that I felt like had no direction, and that a lot of them were coming from, fatherless homes, and then, once they got to being a young adult themselves, and they would just have nobody guiding them, and so they would just go off and really struggle. And so I have felt personally called to try to do that, try to fix that in some way, shape, or form. That's a really big ask. But Sammy and I have had lots of different conversations about like what are the goals here and like what we're doing. And generally what we're trying to filter any life decisions through is like, does it fit this purpose that you have set out? Like, does it fit the purpose of trying to be a good example, primarily, to people in the community, but then also providing something for young men to be able to also go do as well. I don't have to go into too many specifics there, but I would say the blessings that I have received, and that is like through my job or financially, trying to utilize that to do the most good for the most amount of people. Because I think I'm at a point where I would say I can maximize my own gain to a certain level, and maybe I can just keep going up and try to get more and more. But I don't think I'm going to ever be any happier than I am now. Mm-hmm. And so it's trying to decide, okay, how do I use this to then also lift a lot of other people up as much as possible? And for me, it's primarily been, I focus on how do I do that for young men. I guess I got to figure out. I mean, I have an EC football. Like I've done volunteer coaching for several years, and I love the game, but it's primarily a lot of these boys are struggling. They don't know what direction they're going, and it's like they need somebody that cares about them, and that is not necessarily somebody in the school system, because a lot of times there's just the coaches that are in the school system would absolutely love to do that, but it's just harder for them because a lot of times the kids don't want to look at them that way. Like, no, you're a teacher, and you're at school. I'm outside of that system, and so it's and so whenever I'll see some of those guys that I establish relationships with a couple years later, and they'll still want to give me a hug, and I'm just like, yes, that's what I'm hoping for. Like, I'm hoping for that long-term development and that relationship to try to lift others up at the same time. So
yes,
it's kind of a winding answer there, but
I love that. So you and Samantha, Sammy, you're trying to filter what you're doing through the lens of being in service to others.
Right. So like we had I love my career, but there was something that came up with our hospital a couple months ago about the potential for us to get involved with the IU School of Medicine more, so that we could have like residents spending more time with us. And potentially what that was going to do is that I was going to have to maybe take over. There were other people that may have been able to do so, but it was basically me or two other guys would have to be the program director if we wanted to do this. And we had this meeting, and as we were talking about it later, Sammy or Samantha, depending on how people in my family know her by different names, but generally everybody calls her Sammy. She kind of asked me, she just said, I don't know if this is a good idea because I don't feel like this fits with all that you've been talking about as far as what you really care about.
Uh-huh.
And so as soon as she said that, I said, yeah, you're right. Like, it was tempting. And then as soon as she said that, I said, that doesn't fit. So I'm not pursuing that.
So you knew.
And yeah. And so that was helpful because it then says, I've always been wanting to say yes, yes, yes to more. But then now that's allowed us to say no to things, just to say that does not fit about the grand mission statement about what I'm here to do and why I live here, why I have this job, and why we want to do what we want to do. So,
in the world I'm in now, people often ask, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And I was telling Brad the other day that for me, that's shifting to what are you willing to do afraid? Is there something that you want to do that makes you not scared to death, but fearful, uncomfortable, nervous, that's out of your comfort zone?
There is, but I'm trying to think of a way to make this like a good, succinct answer. I'll put it this way. So, that general mission statement of my mind, or in our minds, of like wanting to do something. Like, we talk about wanting to do something big for our community that provides like long-term stability for people. And that's like jobs and things like that. And I don't know what that exactly looks like, but it's something. And we have some friends that, as we've talked about this, that we share a common goal. And I think I'm fearful of really pursuing that with the energy that it would require. because as there's a couple of people that I will listen to a lot of podcasting, a lot of bro podcasting, basically, where it's all, um, work harder, stop belly aching, and just get your nose to the grind type of people. But essentially, like what they've said, most of the time when they're talking about just being effective, it's a lot of, you are not going to be successful at this if you're trying to do this part time, or if you're just letting yourself be distracted. And so, like I'm successful in my career right now, and I really enjoy that career. But with this other thing, would I be able to make it what I would really dream it to be with the time that I could attribute to it now? Or would I really have to say, I'm going to give up a lot of what I'm doing now with the chance of making this something big? And that, to
Yeah.
me, I'm not willing to make that bet yet. I'm not willing to make that sacrifice from a personal comfort standpoint, because I can see, okay, if I keep on doing X, Y, Z, here's where I'll be in 30 years. And basically, it would be this idea of saying, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 10 to 15 years. And I'm not ready to make that jump yet because of the unknown. And even like worst case scenario, I would probably be fine, but it's a lack of trust and faith of saying you'll be fine. So that's a big one to where I'm just like, I'm not willing to do it yet.
That's exciting. It's exciting to think
And
about
one
and
year
to
ago,
dream
I'm
of.
pretty sure my New Year's resolution with my wife was to say, I want clarification on what this idea in my head is, like what that idea actually looks like. And it did not come to fruition. So 2025, I'm hoping we'll give a little bit more clarity to that.
Oh wow, that's exciting. We talk a lot here at our house about the best way to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And Brad, of course, he worked in the banking world and he's an entrepreneur and businessman. And he just tells me over and over, Susan, the best way to help people is to give them a good job.
Yeah.
And we have, struggled our whole lives because we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to make that happen in our community. But yeah, if you want to help people, they need Jesus and a good job.
Yeah. Well, and
Okay.
I mean, that is true, because if you have people that are just generally following Christ, there's so many different things that just fall into place whenever you're doing that. And so that can be the primary focus. But yeah, a good job would also be helpful for a lot of those people.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to enjoy watching from afar to see what you and Samantha come up with and see where God leads you. Okay, one more question, because we're really close on time. We're actually out of time, but I want to know, what's your daily spiritual practice? I like to ask people that.
Daily spiritual practice, I would probably my primary thing that I would say is that in the week itself, the biggest lack that I have is more of the daily spiritual practice, as far as like this time is set apart. I have thankfully been able to, like with our church, we have our Wednesday night set aside for a Bible study still. And I'm very thankful that we've still kept it, because we do kind of center our week around saying that we're still going to have that time, because it's the middle of the week, it's very busy, but then, hey, you're still going to get together with your fellow Christians and to just spend time studying together. And so we still have that, and I'm very thankful for it. And then I've currently been teaching on our Sunday morning classes with the adults. I've been teaching through Exodus for about the last year. And so usually on the weekends is when I prep for that quite a bit, on Saturdays and Sundays. It's probably a pretty big deficiency for me as far as having the more daily walks, other than prayers with my kids, prayers with my wife, and just trying to make sure that you're hitting those markers, because it does seem like life really just sucks away a lot of the other time. But really, I think it's trying to focus on the kids know that this is important and that this is the way you start your day. This is the way you end your day, prayer. And if you can add in other times of, consuming media with podcasting or like just directly reading your Bible, that's great. Thankfully, our kids are big readers. And so they do tend to just like to read anything they can get their hands on, including like, kids' Bibles or action Bibles, things like that. So
That's
hopefully just
good.
encouraging more of that. But I need more of that on the daily walk for sure.
Well, you're at the stage of your life where it's hard to carve out an extra 15 minutes. I totally get that. So we'll end with this question. What do you wish the world knew about Jesus?
I think the primary thing, if we're talking about the world, is to say that Jesus is real. I remember you had some questions too that you thought we may ask, and I used to think that my favorite Bible verse was in 1 Corinthians, where it says, "Do you not know that all those who run in a race basically run to win it?" And so it's like, run your race in a way that you can obtain the prize, And so that was what I really liked. But I really realized that John 1, the whole chapter of John chapter 1 is my favorite one because it talks about God becoming flesh. And I think for me, from that real aspect of saying that this is not just fanciful hoping and that there's this mysterious mythological person, but that Jesus is real. And I was asked, when I was in my residency program, we had like a little retreat, and we were asked the question of, if you could go to one location in time, or one location at one time, any time in history, where would it be? And I said Jerusalem around 33 AD. I said, because if that event, if the crucifixion really took place, then everything about Christianity is true, and that completely confirms everything about my worldview. And so, if this is real, and when that reality sets in, it then leads to, we're talking about that primary thing. If that's the primary thing, everything else falls into place. Is that He did die. He did die for you, and we are saved because of it. And so, a life spent serving Him and of loving Him is well worth it. And at the end of my life, I will be very content with the life that I lived because of it.
So good. So good. Yeah, I feel like if the world knew the truth, they would not be rejecting, because everything they're looking for is found in Jesus.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yep.
Everything. Okay, Levi, thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time. I know you're super busy, and you probably have dinner waiting on the table for you with kids pounding at the door.
Well, in retrospect, or about one of the previous things we talked about, we have one of my son's friends' birthday. We're missing his birthday party, and so we decided to take him out to eat. And we're going to a Mexican restaurant, but my wife and I planned ahead of time. We said we're not going to eat the chips. So I'm not a chip eating person today. And so I got to make sure.
There you go. I don't eat chips. Today I don't eat chips. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
Would you close us with prayer?
Yes, absolutely.
Would you close us with prayer? Thank you.
All right. Our Lord, we thank you for our bodies. We thank you that we have these bodies to be able to serve you, and that we have bodies to love and to cherish. Thank you for the work Susan does in trying to encourage people to live their healthiest lives possible. We know that when our bodies are healthy, it really helps us to be better disciples, to be better followers. But we pray for our spirits and for our souls to be healthy as much as possible, though. And we hope that we can rely on you fully, and to have you speak through us in every moment of our lives, let your goodness shine through, and that whenever people may see the people who call you Lord, that they will be able to be inspired and to see you and to see your greatness rather than just us doing your work. And help us to be the kinds of people you've called us to be. Let us to live the best life possible, so at the end of our lives that we can be satisfied fully in you. And we pray this in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Levi, thank you for being my first guest of 2025.
All right. Well, hopefully it's a great year
Thank
for everyone.
you, everybody, for listening. I appreciate you And I don't take you for granted. And I pray that your year is off to a great start. And see you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Clean Heart Club podcast. I hope that you were blessed and learned some things that will help you on your journey. Let's remember this truth from Psalm 28:7. The Lord is my strength and shield. I trust him with all my heart. He helps me, and my heart is filled with joy. I burst out in songs of thanksgiving. Did you know I wrote a course for you? It's called the Clean Heart Club and contains 10 video teachings about some of my favorite life coaching concepts, which are so helpful. You're also invited to come join the fun in the Clean Heart Club group on Facebook and sign up to receive my weekly newsletter of encouragement. Let's be friends. See you next time.